ask somebody and they're traveling all of the time with work, for instance, they might be stuck in, I don't know, Israel, then they may not be a suitable person to be your substitute decision maker. If they're a person that lives close by, that might help more. Although these days, with so many particularly financial applications that you can do from your phone, some of it, particularly with regards to the financial and property matters, might be able to be dealt with from a distance more easily. But health and personal care decisions, it's often more helpful to have somebody close up. Very often, people will expect family members to do this, and that's fine. But you shouldn't only think about family members. Maybe think about adult friends or people that you have that you care about and trust. When it comes to the financial matters, you really have to have somebody who's very detail oriented because they have to keep entirely separate accounts. So they have to run their money and then they have to keep entirely separate accounts for your money. Many jurisdictions have the ability to appoint a monitor, somebody who can oversee it and has standing to challenge it and can ask more questions of the person who's been appointed, but not all jurisdictions do. And it's also important to have an alternate. So if, for instance, someone gets stuck traveling, that there's somebody else close by who can do it. You can appoint one person or two people or a number of people, but try to be clear about what happens if there's a tie. So if it's two people together, often two children, and they don't agree, what happens then? Is it both of them having to agree at the same time, or can whoever gets to the hospital bed first be good enough? So that's the difference between what's called joint, where they have to make the decision together, or several, where they get to make the decision independently. Sometimes people will have something that says if they can't agree, it'll go to a backup person. So as a result, alternates are every bit as important. I'm just going to take this minute to point out that many people will be confused between the differences of having a power of attorney and having a will. I can't tell you, for the last 20 years, I think every talk I've ever given, someone has come up to me and said, oh, well, I have it taken care of. We have our wills in place. And that's great. You should have your will in place. But wills only help you after you're dead. And so powers of attorney are the kinds of documents, or again, in BC and in the Yukon, representation agreements, and in Quebec it's probably called a mandat, a mandate, although there are some powers of attorney which are much lesser documents there. But those are the documents you need when you're alive but incapable about making a decision. And when you're making a determination about whether a person has capacity, you always have to say capacity to do what? Capacity is always presumed in law, and it's supposed to be narrowly sliced. So you can be capable, for instance, of making health and personal care decisions and capable of making routine financial decisions, but you may not be capable about doing, for instance, a merger and acquisition or some type of managing of your investments. So you're always trying to make sure that we reduce the implications or the impacts on a person's capacity, because you're really removing their civil rights. So it says who to select for a power of attorney. Well, it's going to have to be somebody pretty scrupulous, someone who's going to respect your wishes. They have to do the thing that you would have wanted them to do, not what they think is in your best interests. So they literally slip on their mental shoes and become you. So for instance, if you're a person who is against, for instance, blood donation, and the person who you're making a decision more is for it, you can't use your own thoughts and values about blood donations. You have to wear the hat of the person that you are representing. And there's a lot of details in record keeping. It's not an easy thing to do. Just quickly moving on to powers of attorney abuse. It's a significant area of exploitation. What we know is only about 1/3 of all Canadians will ever kind of make a power of attorney. We've seen where there was a big push to have a lot of public education around things like powers of attorney, and we could bump that up to about 40%. But the minute that the education push is gone through, it will reduce itself back to about 1/3 of the time. And so are powers of attorney good? Well, they're good for some things. I generally think that they're a good idea to have them, but at the same time, they are also one of the most common forms of financial elder abuse or other forms of elder abuse. So really, they're kind of neutral in the sense of they're an excellent tool and they give you control about who you want to choose. But things can still go wrong. As a researcher, as an academic, as somebody who wants to have somebody participate in a study or somebody to wear a particular type of technology, you have to determine whether the person can understand and appreciate that what that technology is going to do, how the information is going to be gathered, what the risks and benefits of wearing or using that technology is going to be. And if they can, then they're capable of making the decision to engage in it or participate in your study and so forth. If they can't, then you need to go to a substitute decision maker. I've just put here for your review a few common myths, particularly with regards to things like financial matters. And I just want you to see these is that, when it comes to things like substitute decision making, it can also layer issues across the life course. And you see here things like she's not using the money anyway, or I'm going to inherit it anyway, or I don't care what she says, she gave me power of attorney and I know what's best for her. All of these are extremely dangerous. For the person who's the donor, the person who's giving the authority, this assumption that the person will know what they want, my daughter knows what I'd want, is just not borne out by the research. In fact, a really very interesting Australian study about 5 or 6 years ago indicated that overwhelmingly people do not know, and they're much more conservative. Someone used the example of the cheese pizza. If you know someone's coming and you're at the pizzeria, but you don't know what they like, you're going to order them the cheese pizza. If you know that they wanted ham and pineapple or meat lovers, you'd have to know that person. But on the whole, you go back to a kind of a conservative idea. What if they're vegetarian? What if they're kosher? Let's get something that everyone can use. And we see that our decision making tends to be the same way. People don't really know what they want, and they'll either tend to be conservative or they'll tend to use their own ideas. So that closes our part on consent, capacity, and advanced care planning. I hope what you got out of it is this: that capacity is situational, capacity is assumed, capacity is a legal determination and not a medical determination, capacity is decisional, so capable for what? Capacity is temporal, you're capable of some things at a certain time. You may not be particularly capable in the morning, but you may be capable in the afternoon. You may have assumptions about you that you'll become less capable because you're old, or because you don't speak the language well, or because you're in trauma or shock. I want you to also take away that each jurisdiction in Canada has slightly different substitute decision-making regimes. Again, we have some materials for you to be able to find out exactly what is the one in your jurisdiction, and that there are two domains, that there's this health and personal care domain and this financial domain, and then you need to cover off both of them. And in the jurisdictions, you need really documents, substitute decision-making documents for both. You can choose the same person, but there's two separate documents. And I also want you to remember that this has nothing to do with having a will. Wills kick in, powers of attorney stop when that person dies. I hope this has been helpful to you.